Hi, this is Mrs. Rodriguez with the Practice Expressions and Equations IAB test. So let's get started. Question 1. What is the value of P so that the expression 4 times 5 plus n is equivalent to 4 times n plus P? So the first thing we need to realize is that equivalent means the same or equal. So they want to make 4 times 5 plus n equal to 4 times n plus p. So you were supposed to recognize we already have the 4 on the outside. We have the n here and the n here. So if the only thing we have missing on this side that could equal p would be that 5. So the answer is 5. Because we want the left-hand side to equal the right-hand side. For question number 2, it says, select all the expressions that are equivalent to 3x plus 4x plus 9 minus 4x minus 3. Now, select all expressions. Expressions is plural, and it says select all. So that's your hint that there's going to be more than one answer. Okay? There's going to be more than one answer. And equivalent means equal to or the same as this expression, 3x plus 4x plus 9 minus 4x minus 3. And we notice they went from this really long expression to a, b, c, and d, which is much shorter. So that means they had to combine like terms. They had to simplify this thing. So I'm going to start just with the first two things I can combine or simplify, and I noticed that 3x and 4x both have x's, so we can combine them. They're like terms, and that gives me 7x plus 9 minus 4x minus 3. And then I noticed that c and d both have the 7x, right? They have the minus the 4x, they just moved it next to it, so let's go ahead and do that. And then they have a 12 or a 6, so they combine this 9 and that 3. So 9 minus 3 is 6, so it's going to be plus 6. Now remember, if you're still having a hard time adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, you can always do a number line, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Started at 9, and you're going to add a negative 3. So you're going to go towards the negatives 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and you get 6. So now I look at A, B, C, and D, and I notice that 7x minus 4x plus 6 is D. So that's going to be our first answer. And C can't be right because they have a 12 and there is no 12. Now I look at A and B, and I notice there's a 3x plus a number. So that means they had to have combined the 7 and the 4. And sure enough, 7x minus 4x is 3x. And then we just drop that 6 down and we get plus 6. And that matches B. You don't get a plus 12, so A cannot be the right answer. So our answers are B and D. All right, moving on. Enter the number that makes the equations 0.87 plus 25 over 100 equal to some number over 100 plus 25 over 100. So you'll notice the 25 over 100 and 25 over 100 is done. So what they did was they changed this 0.87 into a fraction with 100 on the bottom. And you're supposed to remember that percent means out of 100. So if I was going to write 0.87 and turn it into a fraction, I know it's 87%, which is 87 out of 100, so that means the answer is 87. That's what's missing from that box. It'd be 87 over 100. Or another way you can think about it is place value. There are 2 numbers after the decimal, so when you write it as a fraction, it's going to be that number, 87 over 100, because there's 2 numbers after the decimal, so 2 zeros, so it's going to be over 100. Now, do not write 87 over 100 as your answer. That is wrong because they only want the box. The 100's already given. They just want what goes in the box, and that's the 87. Okay. Question 4, select all expressions equivalent. Okay, so once again, select all expressions. Expressions is plural, and they say select all. So that means there's going to be more than one answer. Equivalent means the same, so they want something that's the same as 8x minus 32. And if I look at A, B, C, and D, I notice that they factored out a number, right? So it looks like the distributive property, they factored out a number. So I noticed that they factored out an 8 for A and B and a C and a 4 for C and D. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with factoring out an 8 first. And if I factor out an 8, remember the leftovers stay inside the parentheses. So I have to think backwards. What times 8 is going to bring me back to 8x? And I know 8 times x is 8x. There's a subtraction sign, so it's going to stay. And then I think, okay, what times 8 is going to bring me back to 32? And I know that 8 times 4 is 32. So that's going to be my first answer. And I look over and I see that is A. So A is going to be the first one and B is not possible. Now, they also factored out a 4. So once again, I'm going to start with my original expression. And now I'm going to take out a 4. And remember, the leftovers stay inside the parentheses. So I have to go backwards. What times 4 will bring me back to 8x? Well, 4 times 2x gives me my 8x back. There's a minus sign, so that stays. And then I think, okay, what times 4 is going to bring me back to 32? And I know that is an 8. And I look over and I see that our answer matches D. Okay? And if you'll notice, actually I'm going to erase these. C would not work because 4 times 4x would give us 16x, not 8x. So that's why that wouldn't work. And B, if we did 8 times x, we do get the 8x back, but 8 times 32 is way bigger than 32, guys. 8 times 32 would be, let's see, what is it? It is 256, so that wouldn't work. So remember, the distributive property is you multiply that 8 with the first term and then with the second term. And 8 times 32 does not equal 32, so that doesn't work either. So it's going to be A or D. Okay, number 5, select the expression equivalent. Okay, so on this one it says select the expression, not all. So that means one answer. There is only one answer. Okay, equivalent means equal to or the same. And then we have a very long expression. And then we notice that A, B, C, and D are much shorter. And they only have one X and one Y for A, B, C, and D. So they combine like terms and simplified. So that's what we need to do to see which one is correct. So I have 3x plus 9.5y. And then I notice that there's a minus here. And when we subtract, when you subtract, remember, that means you add the opposite. Okay? So because we're subtracting, we're going to add the opposite. So that's going to turn into a plus, and the opposite of negative 9x is a positive 9x. Plus, the opposite of a positive 6.4y is going to be a negative 6.4y. Okay? And now we're going to combine like terms. Remember, x's go with x's and y's go with y's, okay? You can't add an x or a y together because they're different variables. So let's start with negative 3x and positive 9x. Remember, you can draw a number line if you're still rocky on your positives and negatives. So I'm just gonna, let's see, -1, -2, -3. That's where we're going to start. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That should give us enough numbers. Now, I'm going to start at my -3. And then I'm adding positive 9. So I'm going to go work my way towards the positives 9 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I end up with 6. So it's going to be a positive 6x. And then I have positive 9.5 minus 6.4. So for that one, I'm going to do 9.5 minus 6.4. And I end up with 3.1. And then I look over, and that matches D. All right, number 6. Now it says select all expressions. Select all, that means more than one answer that are equivalent. So that means equal to or the same. And once again, we have an expression that has 3 different x's and a number, and A, B, C, and D. It's been simplified. So let's go ahead and rewrite this. And we're just going to start simplifying. I'm going to take the first 2 terms. Remember, x's go with x's, whole numbers go with whole numbers. So these 2 can go together, and 6 plus 2 is 8x plus 7 plus 4x. And then I'm going to check over and see if it matches anything. And sure enough, that matches B. So B works. Now, they have a 10x, a 12x, and a 6x. Well, if you, C would not work because 6x plus 7 plus 4x, they're missing the 2x. And if you add that, it makes it more than 6. So that's not going to happen. So now I just need to go, okay, well, I can still add these 2 x's together. And 8 plus 4x is going to be 12x plus 7. And I look over. Well, 12x is not 10x, so A doesn't work. So that means it's D, 12x plus 7. All right, question 7. Now remember, on word problems, we want to annotate or highlight and underline the important parts of the problem so we know what the question's asking and what the important information is we need to know to solve it. So Amelia had $300 to spend while shopping. She already spent $145 on clothes. She wants to buy video games that are on sale for $30 each, including tax. Enter the maximum number of video games that Tracy can buy with the remaining money. So there's a couple of things I want to point out. First, I'm going to change my color. First, anytime it says including tax, I know sometimes this can be confusing for students because then you're wondering, well, I don't know what the tax is. What am I supposed to do with the tax? If it says including tax, that means you don't have to worry about it. You can just cross it out. It's not a thing you have to worry about or deal with. It means the tax is already in the price, so you don't have to worry about it. If they want you to calculate the tax with something, then they're going to tell you what the tax equals so you know how you're supposed to calculate it. So if it just says including tax, it means it's already been done for you. Now, she started off with $300 and she spent $145 on clothes. So we need to see how much money she has left over for video games. So 300 minus 145. So 10 minus 5 is 5. This becomes a 9. 9 minus 4 is 5. This becomes a 2. And 2 minus 1 is 155. So I have $155 left, or Amelia does, to buy video games. Video games are $30 each. We want to know the maximum number. Well, one video game is going to be $30. So 2 would be 60. 3 video games would be 90. I'm just adding 30 each time, right? 4 video games would be 120. Right, that's 4, so these are times 30 each time. Okay, that's how I'm doing this. And I'm going to keep doing it until I max out at 155. So 30 times 5 video games would equal 150. And 30 times 6 would equal 180. Well, wait a minute. The maximum number, let's change this to orange. The maximum number of video games if she has $155. So the max she can buy is 5 because if she tried to buy 6, it'd be 180 and that's way too much. So the answer is 5 video games. Okay? You could have also done 155 divided by 30 and you would have gotten 5.16 or something like that. So you would know, well, you can't buy 1/6 of a video game. So the maximum you could buy was 5. All right, moving on. Question 8. Dominic rewrote the following expression. His steps are shown below. Which statement identifies and explains the first mistake Dominic made? So let's take a look and see what he did. Step 1, all he did was rewrite the problem, so he's good. The second thing he did was multiply that 0.3 through using the distributive property. So that means he multiplied 0.3 times 5 times 2.5 and then times 3.2. So if you check, 0.3 times 5 does equal 1.5. 0.3 times 2.5 is 0.75. 0.3 times 3.2 is 0.96. So that one's good. Okay, so these two are good. Now we're on step 3. On step 3, all he did was move the 0.96 to in front of the 0.75. So he went 1.5 and then he just moved that over. Can he do that? That's the question. Can you, let's write it over here so you can see what I'm talking about. So he just moved this one in front. Can you do that? Yes, you can. Because if I had 2 plus 3 minus 5, I could rearrange the 3 and the 2 and do 3 plus 2 minus 5, and I would still get the same thing. So yeah, you can rearrange them. So that means the third step checks out. So the fourth step must be where he ran into problems. Now let's see what he did. He did 1.5, okay, and then you have 0.96 plus 0.75y, and he ended up with 1.5 plus 1.71y. All right, so there's his problem. I'm actually going to delete this highlight. The issue is like terms can go together. So that means regular numbers can go with regular numbers, but if it has a variable, it can only go with other numbers that have a matching variable. There is no other y, so 0.75 gets left by itself. What Dominic did is he combined these two, and that's how he got 1.71. He can't do that. The 0.96 has to combine with the 1.5. So that's where he made his mistake. So the mistake's in 4. He should have, his first mistake was in step 4, he should have combined the 1.5 with the 0.96, not the 0.96 with the 0.5. So that means C is the answer. All right, number 9. Enter the number that makes the equation true. So remember, they just want to know what number is missing in the box. And we have 18 over 100, 18 over 100. We have the plus, So that means that they changed the 0.65 into a fraction. If it turned into a percent, it'd be 65%, which means out of 100, which means the answer is 65. Because 65%, right, written as a fraction, if it means out of 100, that means it's 65 per 100. Which number line shows, and remember, you don't write it over 100, they just want the box, so it'd be 65. Okay, 10. Which number line shows the solution to the inequality? So we have to solve it. We have negative 3x minus 5 is less than negative 2. Step 1, draw the river. Step 2, order of operations backwards. So we're going to take care of that minus 5 before we do the negative 3 times x, because subtraction comes before multiplication when you go backwards in order of operations. And we're going to do the opposite operation. So the opposite of subtraction is addition, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. They cancel out, and I get negative 3x is less than positive 3. And then I have negative 3 times x, so the opposite would be to divide by negative 3. And I get x. Now, be careful because your sign flips. The sign flips because we're dividing by a negative. And 3 divided by a negative 3 is a negative 1. So I know my bubble's going to be open because there's no or equal sign attached to that symbol. So it's going to be an open bubble. So that means B and D wouldn't work. And the Pac-Man is eating X, which means X is bigger than -1. So the arrow is going to point towards all the numbers bigger than -1. So my answer has to be A. All right, 11. Sophia rides her skateboard. She records her time and distance, and each time she stops for water. How many miles will Sophia have traveled at 183 minutes? So first, I have time and I have distance. And we want to know how far in 183 minutes. So 183 minutes is going to go under time. And if I look, I want to see a pattern and find my unit rate. And I notice, what can I do to the 6 to make it an 18, or what can I do to the 18 to make it into a 6? Well, 18 divided by 3 is 6, and 6 times 3 is 18. So if you'll notice, that's what they did on each one. They either divided by 3 or they multiplied the distance by 3. Two different ways of looking at it. So that means if I know it's 183 minutes, well, I have the minutes, and I know if I divide the minutes by 3, I'll get the distance. So 183 divided by 3, well, 3 doesn't go into 1, but 3 goes into 18 6 times, right? I drop my 3. 3 goes into 3 1 time, and I get 3. So my answer is going to be 61. All right, question 12. Same question, but there's a part B now. Now we're in part B. Enter the equation that represents the relationship between Sophia's distance and the time she stops for water. Use D for distance and T for the time in minutes. Okay, so we're not solving for a number now. We're writing an equation. So that means there's going to be an equal sign involved. We already know that on this side it's divided by 3 each time, right? And we know on this side that it's multiplied by 3. So we need to write some sort of equation. And then distance, they told us they want distance to equal D and time to equal T. Well, for time, I know that T divided by 3 gives me the distance. Or I could do it the other way and go, well, I know that T equals 3 times the distance. So really, it just depends on what you want to do. But either one of those would have been correct. You could have also written it as 3 times the distance equals T, or D equals T divided by 3. It's whatever you want to use. I'm going to use T equals 3 times D. Okay? But all of these are equations that work for this problem. All right, question 13. Which is a graph of the solution set for 12 minus x is less than 8? So once again, we have to solve it. Now, keep in mind, anytime you have something like this where there's a negative in front of the x, remember that means that it's -1 times x. And this is important so we know what to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw my river. We have 12 by itself, which means it's a positive 12. So the opposite would be to subtract 12. And you get -1x is less than -4. Now that I have that -1, that 1 in front of the x, it reminds me that's multiplication. So the opposite would be division. So I'm going to divide both sides by -1. We are dividing by a negative, so my sign is going to flip. Don't forget to flip that sign. And -4 divided by -1 is a +4. Now, my bubble's going to be open because there's no or equal sign attached to that symbol. It's just greater than by itself. So that means that I already know if any of the bubbles are filled in, they're no good. Well, all the bubbles are open, so that doesn't help. And if I draw my little Pac-Man, I notice Pac-Man's eating X. So X is all the numbers bigger than +4. Well, D doesn't work because that's a -4, so we can cross that out. A doesn't work because the arrow is pointing towards smaller numbers. C, the arrow is pointing towards smaller numbers, so it has to be B because the arrow is pointing towards all the numbers bigger than a +4. All right, 14. A piano teacher earns $85 for teaching 5 classes and receives a 10% raise. How much money in dollars does he earn per class? So, the first thing I need to figure out is how much does the piano teacher earn for one class? So, if I have $85 for 5 classes, 85 divided by 5 is going to give me 17. So now I know it's $17 per class. Now, they receive a 10% raise. So 10% of 17, the decimal moves to the front one time, or you could do 17 times 0.1. It's however you want to look at it. And so that means 10% is going to equal 1.7. Okay, you're either moving the decimal or multiplying. And then 17 plus 1.7 gives us 18.7. Now, here's an important part. It says in dollars. What does that mean? That means even though I calculated the 10% and I got 18.7, this is not my answer. Because we don't say, oh, that cost $18.7. That's not how the terminology we use when we're discussing money. There is no 0.7 when we're discussing money. The answer is going to be $18.70. You need to have that zero because when we discuss dollars, it's 70 cents, not 0.7. So make sure you put that zero in there. Okay? And then last but not least, 15. The inequality is shown. What is the solution? So once again, we're going to have to solve. We draw the river. The opposite of addition is subtraction. They cancel out. We get -2x is less than +6. We have -2 times x, so the opposite would be to divide by -2. These cancel out. We divided by a negative, so my sign is gonna flip. Don't forget, your sign flips when you divide by a negative. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and we get x is greater than -3. So the Pac-Man's facing x, right, to eat the x, not facing the -3, so it can't be A. It definitely can be B. And it's not a +3, it's a -3. So C and D wouldn't work. Our answer is B. So those are all the problems for the practice IAB. Don't forget on the next page, we have our data splash that you need to memorize for the test. These are the 5 things that you need to know to be successful on the test and that you'll have to write on the test from memory. And remember, the data splash is worth points along with your multiplication table that you have to do. All right, hopefully this helps. And remember, as always, if you have any more questions, need additional help, feel free to ask me during class or to make an appointment with me during office hours. Okay, hope you have a great day.